All right, in this chapter, we're going to be going over photosynthesis. We won't be covering all of the topics in this chapter. We'll just be going over photosynthetic organisms, the process of photosynthesis, how plants convert solar energy, and then how plants fix carbon dioxide. Those last two sections, section 3 and 4, are about the chemical reactions that are involved in photosynthesis itself. So this is just a slide. You don't need to write anything down. This is just up there to help me remember all of my notes. But this is just a sort of a summary slide of why we should care about photosynthesis. We've already begun discussing the importance of photosynthesis in the energy and chemical cycles of the environment. We rely on photosynthetic plants and algae and bacteria to harness carbon dioxide from the air and turn it into oxygen, carbohydrates, oils, amino acids. So additionally, photosynthesis could be key to solving the world's fuel crisis. Plant scientists have been tweaking the basic chemistry of photosynthesis to create commercially important oils and fuels. A great example of that would be the camelina, a drought-resistant oilseed crop. And scientists are improving the efficiency of photosynthesis using genetic engineering so that the top leaves, the leaves found at the upper branches of the tree, are actually lighter. They allow more sunlight to filter down and pass through to the leaves underneath, thereby improving photosynthesis and maximizing efficiency. If you think about it, photosynthesis requires access to the light. So you would think that only the leaves that are found at the very top of the tree in a very dense forest would be able to photosynthesize and produce chemical energy out of solar energy. But if we could actually find a way to make the leaves at the top of the tree almost transparent, so that way more light could actually filter through the leaves, we could make the entire tree all the way down involved in the photosynthetic process. There's also been work on improving carbon dioxide absorption to increase the raw materials for oil production. A great example of this would be terpene. It's a high-energy organic molecule from pine trees that makes turpentine. Scientists are finding ways to naturally increase terpene production for its use in making aviation biofuels. If we can make the individual trees more efficient at producing those natural resources, we won't have to rely so much on things like natural gas. So here's just sort of an overview of photosynthetic organisms. As we discussed previously, all life on Earth depends on solar energy. Photosynthetic organisms like algae, plants, and cyanobacteria transform solar energy into chemical energy of carbohydrates. These are called autotrophs because they produce their own food. So that would be this category here. Together, all of the photosynthetic creatures produce between 100 and 200 billion tons of sugar every year. That's enough sugar to build 2 million Empire State Buildings out of sugar cubes. And they do this through the process of photosynthesis, a process that captures solar energy and it transforms that solar energy into chemical energy, glucose. Energy ends up stored in the carbohydrates, glucose, which can then be used to build up things like cellulose or starch. Photosynthesizers produce enough food to feed not only themselves, but consumers as well. So they can feed themselves as well as the heterotrophs. Heterotrophs then eat those producers, they eat those autotrophs, and then they produce in that process. They burn up that glucose, that chemical energy, and they convert it to physical energy and heat. And the glucose, the remaining glucose, once it's broken down, becomes carbon dioxide and water. Both heterotrophs and autotrophs use organic molecules produced by photosynthesis as the source of chemical energy for cellular work. So this is just an overview slide of photosynthesis. We use solar energy to convert We use solar energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. Cellular respiration is where we turn glucose and oxygen back into carbon dioxide and water plus chemical energy. So carbon dioxide plus water and solar energy equals glucose and oxygen. Glucose and oxygen together give off chemical energy as well as carbon dioxide and hydrogen and water. So photosynthesis is going to take place in the green portions of plants, specifically in the leaves, which contain mesophyll tissue. Mesophyll tissue is specifically optimized for photosynthesis. The tissue made up of cells that contains, the tissue is made up of cells that contain a large number of chloroplasts, which is the organelle responsible for photosynthesis. The raw materials for photosynthesis are carbon dioxide and water. So here's my question for you. Where do those materials come from? And this is a question that you should be able to answer for either your homework or for your quizzes or tests. But you should be able to tell me by the end of this chapter, where did the carbon dioxide and water come from for the raw materials of photosynthesis? Well, I'll give it to you. Roots are going to absorb the water that moves up the vascular tissue. So water is going to come from the ground, and it's going to be brought up through the plant through the root system. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, comes from the atmosphere. It's going to enter the leaf through small openings called stomata, and it's going to diffuse into chloroplasts found inside of the mesophyll cells. So water comes from the ground source, carbon dioxide comes from the atmosphere. Here is just a structure or a blow up of the structure of a leaf. And I want to spend just a little bit of time looking at this. What you'll often see, so if you go outside and find yourself a leaf, what you'll see is that on the top of the leaf, there's going to be a really dark cuticle layer. The lower layer on the bottom side will also have a cuticle. Pardon me, will also have a waxy cuticle. But it typically tends to be lighter in color, and the reason for that is because all of the chloroplasts, or the tissue that is going to be densest in chloroplasts, is going to be found just underneath the upper epidermis, just underneath that upper epidermis and cuticle layer. The reason for this is because that's where the sun shines down. Sunshine does not come up from the ground. It would not be beneficial to have all of our chloroplasts on the underside of the cell. So we're going to put our chloroplasts on the upper side of the leaf, where there's going to be more access to solar energy. Now we do have a leaf vein that's going to be running throughout. This is going to supply all of these cells with the water needed to maintain photosynthesis. On the underside of the leaf, we have stoma. Now the interesting thing about the stoma is they're found on the underside of the leaf. This is where oxygen and carbon dioxide can breathe or diffuse in and out of the leaf. Now, can anybody think or posit an idea of why we have our stoma on the underside of the leaf and not on the upper side of the leaf? I'm going to leave that out there for you. The structure of a leaf is actually pretty fascinating and pretty ingenious to accomplish what it needs to most efficiently. So we have a thick cuticle on the upper layer. We have the stoma on the underneath layer. Leaves tend to be more green on the outside or on the upside than they are on the downside. And we have these veins running throughout. So I just want you to think about the structure, think about the function, and see if you can tell me why stoma should be on the underside of the leaf and not on the upper side. All right, so now we're going to move into photosynthesis as a whole. Once we have our water and our carbon dioxide in the photosynthetic cells, the carbon dioxide and water are going to diffuse into the chloroplasts. The chloroplasts are going to be the site of photosynthesis. Outside of the chloroplast, there's going to be a double membrane that surrounds that surrounds the organelle. And then there's going to be a semi-fluid interior that's going to be much like the cytoplasm of the cell or the matrix of the mitochondria. This is called the stroma. The stroma is going to be found right in here. That's going to be the jelly-like substance in the space. Now within the stroma, a separate membrane system is going to form flattened sacs. These are going to be called thylakoids. The thylakoids, in some places, these are going to be stacked up to form a grana. The chlorophyll necessary for photosynthesis is found in this thylakoid membrane. So what would be the benefit of having the thylakoid folded into these flattened sacs? I'm going to give you a minute to think about it while I take a sip of coffee. If you remember when we talked about structure of cells and organelles, the energy related organelles, we talked about just briefly how the process of photosynthesis is going to be, it's a two-part process that takes place on both the thylakoid membrane and in the stroma. It's going to, so in order to maximize efficiency, we need lots and lots of surface area. We need lots of contact between the membrane and the jelly-like substance. And in order to get that lots of contact, we need lots and lots of surface area. So this is how we are able to maximize our efficiency, by we're increasing our surface area to volume ratio. We have so much membrane, so much membrane stacked back and forth and on top of each other with so much exposure to the stroma that this is going to maximize our efficiency. So always be thinking about that structure equals function. If you see an organelle and it's designed a specific way, think about why that is. Think about what is its function, what is its purpose, how does its structure relate to its function. The reason I harp on this is because, one, if you go on to take any chemistry courses or organic chemistry, structure equals function. That just as a blanket statement is going to save your butt so many times. But also, it's just a key it's a key way to help understand the process of life. We're going to talk about natural selection a little bit later on, but there really are no accidents in the design of nature. Every structure, a specific structure, is going to have a function. All the function is going to come from its specific shape and structure. There's a very strong relationship or a correlation, and so this is a fantastic way to hypothesize, to study, to learn, to investigate. If you notice something odd about the structure, maybe see what that might have to do with the function of that particular organelle, plant, or organism. So keep coming back to this. It's a great, and honestly, it's just a great way to learn. If you know that there is, that the process of photosynthesis occurs in the stroma and the thylakoid membrane, well, then you'll know that it's very important that we have a lot of thylakoid and stroma. We have a lot of interaction between those two. If what we want is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, then what we need is a lot of peanut butter and a lot of jelly. We can't have a whole lot of peanut butter and almost no jelly. That's not a great, delicious sandwich. We also can't have a whole lot of jelly and not a whole lot of peanut butter. Again, not a great sandwich. We want really good mix of both. We need really good even proportions. So electrons are going to be energized. So in the thylakoid membranes, the chloroplasts that contain chlorophyll and other pigments absorb the solar energy that's going to drive that photosynthesis. In this process, electrons are going to be energized. Then carbon dioxide will be reduced to form a carbohydrate, and in the stroma, the carbon dioxide is going to combine with water to form that glucose molecule, C6H12O6. So we need a strong correlation between the thylakoid membrane and the stroma. So here we have just a summary reaction, chemical reaction of the process of photosynthesis, and we're going to cover that in our next section.